In this video with the AnKing, I'm going to go over getting strong letters of recommendation because this is such a key part of your application to residency. If you want any help with this entire process, we do have a Patreon, or you can go to this website link here. We also have lots of social media. If you want to follow us, we give regular tips and tricks, and of course, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe to the YouTube channel here. So, a very important part of who's writing the letter is who. Who is writing your letter is going to matter because they're going to have connections at different schools. They're going to they might carry weight with their name. They might be the department chair that's very well connected or very well recognized and respected. A lot of things like that. So who is going to write your letter? You need to identify this first, and I'm very early on. In fact, if you already know your specialty at the beginning of third year, I would start thinking about who's going to write your letter at that time. One person I would definitely consider as your research mentor. Whoever you've been doing research with in the field of choice, do it with them because they will have that research component that they can talk about, and they can talk specifically to about how quickly you get things done or how well the work was done and you're self-motivated, those kinds of topics. But I would try and work with your research mentor in clinic. If you can work with them on your rotation or whatever it may be, that's going to be a really, really helpful thing so that they can write about both aspects of you. But research mentor, definitely consider having them write a letter. For other mentors, you might have somebody who you've been meeting with regularly every 6 months or something like that to get you into dermatology. Like me, I applied to dermatology, and or if you're trying to go into family medicine, if you've been meeting with someone every 6 months through med school to what things do I need to know about family medicine, that kind of thing, that mentor may be a good person to reach out to because they know a little bit about you. They're a little more familiar. And of course, you can meet with them and work with them on your rotation so that you have more exposure to them in clinic. And that will be very helpful. The next person I would consider for your letter is the program director and or the chair of the department. The program director typically is a little more connected to the residency program, both at your home and at other institutions. So I would probably favor that over the chair. But the chairs are often, they've been around the department for a long time. They're very well connected in other departments, those kinds of things. So the chair is often a very good person to use. Now's probably a good time to mention you need 3 letters. You can do 4. And I would tell you that you should get more letters than less. Get more than you need even, because sometimes people won't come all the way through. But it's also good you can use different letters at different institutions. For example, if the program director has a connection at one program, but the chair has a connection at another program, you can use those letters separately. And I'll show you in a little bit here what it looks like on ERAS and like what it actually looks like when you upload your letters. The next thing I would do is know who writes really strong letters in the department. One way to know is to ask your mentors, your research mentor, like who writes strong letters. For me, that was something, someone told me, don't get a letter from him. He's not very good at writing strong letters. This person writes great letters. And so knowing who writes strong letters is important. The other thing is when you're asking people about getting a letter of recommendation, ask them, do you feel comfortable writing me a very strong letter of recommendation? And phrase it that way. You want to know if they feel comfortable doing that. And that's important. The next thing I would do is identify very early, like I said, in your third year, who's going to do it. The reason for that is if you're going to go on to, for example, I had a dermatology rotation towards the end of my third year, and I specifically asked them when they were scheduling what I was going to do during that month, can I spend a week with these 3 people? Because I want those 3 people to be my mentor. So I ended up spending 4 days with each of my mentors, which was great because I had a lot more exposure to them in clinic and they were able to write better letters for me. So the earlier you know these things, the better. The other reason is if you're on your rotations, you can approach them and say, what do you feel comfortable writing me a letter? Or just say like, hey, I was thinking that you might be a strong letter writer for me. And I know we're working together for the next week. Is that if you feel comfortable at the end of this week, would you be comfortable writing me a strong letter? Just to kind of give them a heads up. That way, when they're working with you over the course of a week, they are looking for specific things you do that they can remember and then write about later. The next thing I would do is, like I said, don't plan on getting more letters than you actually need. If you do an away rotation, definitely try and get a letter, but don't plan on it. You still want to get your 3 or 4 letters from your home institution. and then try and get one from your away rotation or however many away rotations you do. The advantage of getting one from that is people will look and be like, oh, they've got letters from different institutions, like they're obviously good. But also you can use that away rotation when applying to that program. And if that program has a recommendation from somebody that's really strong, and it's somebody within their own department, that's going to go a long way to help you. Okay, so how to write your own. The reason I bring this up is because a lot of letter writers will say, I want you to write your own letter, and then I will edit it and adjust it. And a lot of people ask me this question. Now, I was supposed to write one of my own. I was going to, and then unfortunately had a family member pass away, and so they were very kind and took it over for me. But just so you are aware, I got lots of tips here on things that I was planning on working on, and tips that other people have told me. One thing is you're going to start the letter with, how they know you, how long they've known you, what their connection is. That's always a great way to start a letter of recommendation, just to establish in the reader's mind, did this person work with them for a weekend, or I've known this person ever since they were 5 years old, so I can tell you every little detail about their life to give it some context. Then you're going to go into a paragraph or two of like why this person's amazing. What kind of things do I love about this person? And then the last paragraph is leave that for them. That's generally where they're going to write comments like I've put here, like, this was in the top 1% of all students I've had, or, this was the best medical student I've ever worked with, things like that. And, you don't want to necessarily write that in for yourself. You can kind of hint at it, but that's where the letter writer is going to do that piece of the writing themselves with what they're comfortable writing. So you can kind of put bullet points in or whatever, but don't feel like you need to write that portion of it. Now, this is a tip that I learned. I was on the admissions committee for the University of Utah accepting people into medical school, and I found when I was reading letters of recommendation, people who bolded and underlined key phrases in that, like, why you're awesome paragraph, my eyes went straight to it. And it was super easy to read that letter and very confidently, very quickly feel like this is a great applicant. So that's just something that, just a recommendation. And then, there's the jack of all trades is what was mentioned in one of my letters. So you can use terms like that. These other quotes here, those are things that were mentioned in my letters of recommendation. I haven't actually read them, but that's what people told me as they were interviewing me, that said, he's a really innovative person, efficient with his work and his research, things like that. So if people were reading those parts of my letter to me, that meant that those were an important part. So use terminology similar to this. I think it will help you. Now, suggestions for the writers, and you can give your writers suggestions. And one thing I would do is use your narrative. And I have another video planned for this playlist that talks about crafting your narrative. And it will go over, you want to have basically 3 separate domains throughout medical school you're focusing on. So you want to use your narrative in the letters and between your 3 letter writers. So you might have each letter writer focus on one aspect of that domain as the focus piece, but they'll also mention the other domains in their letters. Now, when you talk to your letter writers, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, I talked to them beforehand, or one of them I worked with for 2 weeks. So I got a pediatric letter because I wanted to do pediatric preliminary years. So I worked with this inpatient doctor for 2 weeks. So after the first week, I went and talked with him and said, hey, we've been working together for a while, and I know we have next week. I'm really interested in doing a pediatric prelim, and was wondering if there's a possibility, at the end of this rotation, if you feel comfortable writing me a strong letter of recommendation. And he said, yeah, I think that would be great. Why don't we talk at the end of this rotation? So we did. At the end of the rotation, I said, do you feel comfortable writing me a strong letter? And he said, yes. Email me when that time comes and send me your CV and your personal statement. And that's kind of how the conversation went with all of my letter writers. So you will want your CV and your personal statement ready months in advance so that you can give it to them. And then you need to, kind of give them a deadline on when to do things. Now, some letter writers may offer to write a letter specific, if you're really interested in going to Oregon and they have a connection there or something, they will write 2 letters, one that's a very generic general letter and one that is specific and for that Oregon school. And that's awesome. If they offer to do that, you absolutely should take them up on it, because that's going to go a long way. And if you feel very comfortable asking them about that, you could ask, because those kinds of things where they change one paragraph is going to go a long way. And I'll show you when we actually go into ERAS how that would work. And I'll show you that in a second. Another thing here is politely, asking them to make it sound like you basically walk on water and you're the best medical student ever. A good letter of recommendation versus a better one versus the best one makes a huge difference. Everyone generally gets pretty positive letters of recommendation. So I would say that a bad letter of recommendation is one that is just good. If that makes any sense. A good letter of recommendation is one that is amazing and makes it sound like you're the best person ever. So you want something that sounds absolutely positive, and politely asking for that, I think can help. Another thing, like I mentioned just a few seconds ago, is give them a hard deadline. Tell them that they need to give you or submit it to the website by this date, and do that early, because there's a good chance life happens, things happen, and they don't get it in. And there's a pretty cold deadline for when ERAS is submitted, and the actual programs will download ERAS as soon as they possibly can. So you definitely want to have everything in there. So with that, I'm going to actually go over to the ERAS website and show you what it looks like with the letters and how you can have multiple and how all of that works. Okay, so I get onto the ERAS website here under documents, and letters of recommendation is where I'm going. So basically going to come down to here. And these are the people that wrote my letters of recommendation. Now, if I were to add a new one, basically it gives you like a link, and you come over to Actions and download this letter request and then send it to your letter writer, and they follow those instructions there to upload your letters. Now, notice I had dermatology and I had 3 of them. I wrote this in here. Nobody sees my description. And then I wanted to apply to a pediatric prelims for my dermatology year, so I ended up getting 2 peds prelim letters that I used separately. And like I said, you can use 4 letters for a program. So some of those peds years I used 2 peds and 2 derm, or one of the derm ones is a peds derm. So you can mix them up. You could do 3 derm and 1 peds, and you could choose different letters. I also had an internal medicine letter for my prelim. So if any of you are applying to prelims, I would recommend getting an internal medicine letter or something like that. Now, this also brings me to an important point as you're looking at this list, is that you want to make sure that you're set up to have it in whatever you want. If you start 3rd year and you have no idea what you want to do, then you should approach every single rotation like you want to get a letter of recommendation from somebody out of it. And you might even ask as you're going through that rotation, or ask at the end of the rotation, would you feel comfortable writing me a letter of recommendation if this is what I decide to do? And so think about that as you're going through. But basically, that's kind of how this happens, just like this. And then if I went to the programs, and I can go to programs applied to here and scroll down, you can see that for the University of Tennessee in dermatology, I assigned these 3 letters. Whereas if under this is a transitional year, if I look at the documents, you can see I assigned the same dermatology letters, the derm, but I also did this internal medicine letter. And then it's similar to how the personal statements work, where you can assign different personal statements to different programs. So with that, hopefully this was helpful, at least gets you started on the road for a strong letter of recommendation, and everything works out for you. Thanks for learning with the AnKing. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel here, as well as follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Patreon. That is at AnKingMed. Also, feel free to reach out via email or check out our website, ankingmed.com, for more tips and tricks.